The space station Velis 7 floated in the darkness between three solar systems. It was old, though long before humans had joined the Galactic Union. The metal walls had turned gray from centuries of use. The air always smelled like recycled oxygen and engine oil. But for thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds, it was home. Una had lived on Velis 7 for 3 years. She was a human woman of 32 years, with black hair that she kept tied back and tired eyes that had seen too much sadness. On Earth, she had worked as an animal doctor. She had saved hundreds of creatures from death. But Earth had become too painful for her after she lost her family in an accident. So she had applied for a job on the farthest station she could find. And she had never looked back. Her work on Velis 7 was simple. She ran a small rehabilitation center for animals found on damaged cargo ships. When traders crashed or abandoned their vessels, sometimes animals were left behind. Una took them in. She healed their wounds. She fed them until they were strong. Then she found them new homes on different worlds. The pay was terrible. The hours were long. Most species on the station ignored her completely. But Una did not mind. She preferred the company of animals to the company of people. Animals never lied. Animals never betrayed. Animals simply were what they were. On the night that changed everything, Una was cleaning cages in her small facility. The room was cramped and poorly lit. She had only 6 enclosures, and 5 of them were currently empty. In the 6th, a small bird-like creature from the Telex system was recovering from a broken wing. It chirped softly as Una worked. The door chime rang. Una looked up, surprised. It was very late in the station cycle. Most beings were sleeping. She walked to the door and pressed the panel to open it. Standing in the corridor was a Morellian. The species was common in this sector of space. They had 4 arms, pale gray skin, and large eyes that reflected light like mirrors. This particular Morellian was female, and she was shaking badly. In her lower 2 arms, she clutched a metal container about the size of a small box. "Please," the Morellian said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, you must help." Una recognized her. Her name was Tova. She was a trader who passed through Velis 7 every few months. They had spoken perhaps 3 or 4 times, always briefly. "What is wrong?" Una asked. "Are you hurt?" "Not me." Tova pushed the container toward Una. "Them." Una took the container carefully. It was a cryo unit, designed to keep biological material frozen during transport. The display on the side showed that something inside was alive. 3 somethings, actually. 3 heartbeats, slow and faint. "What are they?" Una asked. Tova looked left and right down the corridor. Her large eyes were filled with fear. "I found a ship, abandoned, drifting near the asteroid belt. I went inside looking for salvage." She paused and swallowed hard. There was a female, dead for many days, but her children were still alive. Barely. I put them in the cryo unit to save them. Una carried the container to her examination table and began the warming sequence. The frost on the small window slowly cleared. Inside she saw movement. Small bodies covered in dark blue fur. 6 legs each. Tails curled tight against their bellies. Her blood went cold. "Tova," Una said slowly, "do you know what these are?" "I know." Tova's voice cracked. "They are Keth." The Keth. Una had never seen one in person, but every being in the galaxy knew about them. They were apex predators from a death world on the far edge of known space. They were fast, strong, intelligent, and absolutely deadly. A single adult Keth could kill a dozen armed soldiers before being brought down. They had been responsible for the destruction of 2 colony worlds before the Galactic Union had classified them as Class 9 predators. Class-9 was the highest threat level. Any being caught possessing a Class 9 species faced immediate execution. No trial, no appeal. The law was absolute. Are you insane? Yuna hissed. Bringing these here? Do you know what they will do to you if they find out? I know. Tova was crying now, her tears leaving wet trails on her gray skin. But they are babies, orphans. Their mother is dead. They will die without help. She grabbed Yuna's arm with two of her hands. You are the only one on this station who helps animals. You are the only one who might understand. Yuna looked down at the container. The warming sequence was complete. The lid could be opened now. She should call security. She should report this immediately. It was the law. It was the safe thing to do. It was the smart thing to do. She opened the lid. 3 cubs looked up at her. They were small, each one about the size of her forearm. Their blue fur was matted and dirty. Their 6 legs were thin from hunger. But their eyes caught the light and held it, glowing like golden coins in the dim room. The smallest one opened its mouth and made a sound. It was not a growl or a hiss. It was a tiny, weak cry. The cry of a hungry baby calling for its mother. Yuna felt something break inside her chest. She had heard that sound before, many times. From puppies abandoned in shelters. From kittens left in boxes on the roadside. From every small creature that had ever been thrown away by a universe that did not care. She reached into the container and picked up the smallest cub. It weighed almost nothing. It was shivering. Its golden eyes looked up at her face, and it made that sound again. That desperate, hopeful little cry. You stupid woman, Yuna whispered to herself. You absolute fool. She looked at Tova. Leave them with me. Go back to your ship. Pretend this never happened. If anyone asks, you know nothing. Tova nodded quickly. She wiped her tears and backed toward the door. Thank you. Thank you. I will never forget this. You must forget this, Yuna said firmly. That is the only way we all survive. Tova left. The door closed behind her. Yuna was alone with 3 illegal predator cubs that could get her killed. She placed the smallest, one back in the container with its siblings. All 3 of them crawled toward each other and huddled together for warmth. The middle one licked the smallest one's face with a tiny pink tongue. Yuna prepared a mixture of protein formula. It was designed for mammals, close enough to work for the cubs. She filled a small feeding bottle and returned to the container. The largest cub was watching her. Its golden eyes tracked every movement she made. There was intelligence in that gaze, understanding. It knew that Yuna was not its mother, but it also knew that she was trying to help. Yuna offered the bottle to the largest cub first. It sniffed once, twice, and then began to drink. The other 2 smelled the formula and pushed closer, wanting their turn. For the next hour, Yuna fed them. She cleaned their fur. She checked them for injuries and sickness. They were weak and dehydrated, but they would survive. They were fighters. When they finally fell asleep in a pile of warm blankets, Yuna sat on the floor beside them and watched them breathe. What am I going to do with you? She asked quietly. The smallest cub twitched in its sleep, chasing dreams of prey it had never hunted. Yuna had no answer. She only knew that she could not let them die. Whatever came next, whatever the cost, she would find a way to keep them safe. Outside, the station continued its slow rotation through the endless dark. Thousands of beings slept and worked and lived their lives, unaware that in a small rehabilitation center on the lower decks, a human woman had just made a choice that would change everything. 4 months passed like water through fingers. The cubs grew faster than Yuna had expected. What had once fit in her palms now stood as tall as her knees. Their blue fur had grown thick and beautiful, shining like the night sky when light touched it. Their golden eyes had become sharper, always watching, always learning. Yuna named them on the third night, when she finally admitted to herself that she was keeping them. The largest one, bold and protective, she called Bora. The middle one, clever and curious, she called Taiho. And the smallest one, the runt who followed her everywhere like a shadow, she called Duri. They were nothing like what the story said. The Galactic Union described the Keth as mindless killing machines, driven by hunger and rage. But Bora, Taiho, and Duri were gentle with Yuna. They understood when she was tired. They knew when she was sad. They learned to wait patiently for food instead of fighting. They played with each other like any young animals, tumbling and wrestling without ever drawing blood. They were smart, terrifyingly smart. By the second month, they understood more than 50 commands. Sit, come, quiet, hide. The last one was the most important. When Yuna said hide, all 3 cubs would disappear into the small compartment she had built behind a fake wall panel. They would stay there, silent and still, until she told them it was safe. She needed that command often. Station inspectors came to her facility twice each month. Maintenance workers arrived without warning to check pipes and wires. Delivery beings brought supplies at random hours. Every knock on her door sent ice through her veins, but the cubs were perfect. They never made a sound when they were supposed to be hidden. They never tried to escape. They trusted Yuna completely, and she carried that trust like a weight on her shoulders. The hardest part was finding enough food. Keth were carnivores. They needed meat to survive, and free-growing cubs needed a lot of it. Yuna spent half her monthly salary buying protein packs from the station market. She told the merchants she was feeding a large species in recovery. They did not ask questions. On Vela 7, everyone had secrets. She was exhausted. She barely slept. She had lost weight from skipping her own meals to make sure the cubs had enough. But every time Duri pressed his warm body against her leg, every time Taiho brought her a toy to throw, every time Bora lay across her doorway like a guardian, she knew it was worth it. She was not alone in her secret for long. Junho was a human like her. He was 35 years old, tall and thin, with rough hands from years of mechanical work. He maintained the lower decks of the station, fixing broken machines and patching leaking pipes. He and Yuna had met 2 years ago when he came to repair her air recycler. They had become friends slowly, sharing meals when their schedules allowed, talking about Earth and the lives they had left behind. He discovered the cubs by accident. It happened on a day when Yuna was away from her facility, buying supplies from the market. Junho had come to fix a broken heating unit that Yuna had reported the week before. He had the access code to her door because she had given it to him for emergencies. He walked into the facility and found Bora sitting in the middle of the room. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Junho stared at the creature that should not exist, at least not here, not on a civilian station. Bora stared back, her golden eyes fixed on this stranger who had entered her home. Then Taiho emerged from behind a shelf. Then Duri crept out from beneath a table. Junho backed against the wall. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He knew what these creatures were. Everyone knew. Class 9 predators. Death on 6 legs. He should run. He should scream for help. He should do anything except stand here like a fool. Duri walked toward him. Junho stopped breathing. The cub was the size of a medium dog now, with claws that could tear through metal and teeth that could crush bone. It approached him slowly, sniffing the air, studying him with those terrible golden eyes. Then Duri sat down at his feet and made a small chirping sound. It was not a threat. It was a greeting. The same sound the cubs made when Yuna came home. Junho looked at Duri. Duri looked at Junho, and something in the engineer's chest shifted. Just slightly. When Yuna returned an hour later, she found Junho sitting on the floor with all 3 cubs around him. Taiho was chewing on his boot. Bora was watching him with calm interest. Duri had fallen asleep with his head on Junho's knee. "I can explain," Yuna said immediately. "You really cannot," Junho replied. But he did not move. He did not push the cubs away. He just sat there, one hand resting on Duri's soft blue fur. Yuna told him everything. The night Tova brought the cubs. The months of hiding them. The fear that never went away. She told him she understood if he wanted to report her. She told him she would not blame him. Junho listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You are completely insane," he finally said. "They will kill you for this. I know. You cannot keep doing this alone. The food, the hiding, the constant fear. You will break. I know." Junho looked down at Dori, still sleeping peacefully on his knee. The cub's sides rose and fell with each breath. His paws twitched as he dreamed. "I will help you," Junho said. Yuna felt tears burn her eyes. "You do not have to do this. I know." Junho smiled, and it was a tired smile. The smile of a man who knew he was making a terrible decision and could not stop himself. "But someone has to watch out for you. You are terrible at taking care of yourself." From that day forward, they worked together. Junho smuggled extra food from the station's waste processing center. Meat that was going to be recycled, perfectly good but unwanted. He modified Yuna's facility, adding better soundproofing and a larger hiding space for the growing cubs. He covered for her when she was too exhausted to leave her room. The cubs accepted him easily. To them, Junho was simply another member of their strange little family. Bora allowed him to pet her head. Taiho brought him things to throw. Dori followed him around just as faithfully as he followed Yuna. For 2 more months, they managed to keep the secret. 2 months of close calls and lucky escapes. 2 months of lying and hiding and praying that no one would discover the truth. But Velis 7 was an old station. And old stations had eyes everywhere. Commander Seal was a Torvian, a species known for their rigid devotion to law and order. He had copper-colored scales, sharp yellow eyes, and a reputation for being absolutely merciless. He had served as security chief on Velis 7 for 11 years, and in that time, he had never failed to catch a criminal. The anonymous tip arrived on his computer during the night cycle. It contained surveillance footage from a corridor camera outside the rehabilitation center. The footage showed Yuna carrying large amounts of meat into her facility. Far more meat than any of her current patients required. SEOL watched the footage 3 times. Then he accessed her records. 1 patient currently. A small bird. No carnivores. He pulled up older footage. Weeks of it. He watched Yuna's comings and goings. He watched Junho's visits. He noticed how they always closed the door quickly. How they always looked nervous. How the facility's power consumption had tripled in the past few months. Seal did not know what they were hiding. But he knew they were hiding something. He assembled a team of 12 guards. The best on the station. Armed with weapons that could stop anything short of a warship. The next morning, he would have his answers. The morning began like any other. Yuna woke early, before the station lights had switched from night mode to day mode. She checked on the cubs first, as she always did. Dora was awake, watching the door with her usual alertness. Taiho was stretching his 6 legs, preparing for the day. Duri was still curled in his sleeping spot, refusing to open his eyes until Yuna scratched behind his ears. She prepared their breakfast. Fresh meat, cut into small pieces, mixed with nutrients to keep them healthy. The cubs ate quickly, but not desperately. They had learned patience. They had learned that food would always come. After they finished eating, Yuna cleaned their area. She checked their fur for parasites. She examined their claws and teeth to make sure they were growing properly. This had become her routine, as natural as breathing. These creatures depended on her, and she would not fail them. She was feeding Dory a second helping when the door exploded inward. Not literally exploded, but it might as well have. The metal panel slid open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Armored bodies poured through the opening like water through a broken dam. 12 guards, covered head to foot in tactical gear, carrying weapons designed to kill creatures much larger than Keth cubs. Behind them came Commander Seal. The Torvian walked slowly, his clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. His yellow eyes swept across the room, taking in everything. The makeshift beds, the food containers, and finally, the 3 blue-furred creatures pressing themselves against the human woman's legs. "Human Una," Seal said. His voice was cold and flat, like ice over deep water. "You are charged with harboring prohibited predatory species. Classification: Class 9. The creatures will be terminated immediately. You will be detained for tribunal." Una did not move. She could not move. Her body had frozen, every muscle locked in place by terror. This was the moment she had feared for 6 months. The moment when her luck finally ran out. Bora growled. It was a deep sound, rumbling from her chest like distant thunder. She had grown large enough now that her growl actually meant something. Her golden eyes fixed on Commander Seal, tracking him as he moved. The guards shifted nervously. Their weapons were raised, but their hands were not steady. These were security officers who dealt with smugglers and thieves. They were not prepared to face creatures that could tear through their armor like paper. "Stand aside, human," Seal ordered. "This is not negotiable." Una found her voice. It was small and weak, but it was there. "They are children, orphans. They have not harmed anyone. They are predators. Their nature is violence. Their nature is whatever they are taught." Una's voice grew stronger. She put her hand on Bora's head, feeling the warm fur beneath her fingers. Bora stopped growling. She trusted Una. Even now, facing death, she trusted the human who had saved her life. Commander Seal's eyes narrowed. "You would defend monsters?" "They're not monsters." Una looked directly at the Torvian commander. She was still afraid. She was more afraid than she had ever been in her life. But something else was growing inside her now. Something that burned through the fear like fire through dry grass. "I have cared for them for 6 months. They have never hurt me. They have never tried to escape. They play and sleep and eat, just like any young creatures. The only monsters here are the ones pointing weapons at babies." The words hung in the air. Several guards exchanged glances. One of them, a young Morellian, lowered his weapon slightly before quickly raising it again. Seal was unmoved. "The law is clear. Class 9 predators cannot exist in civilian space. This is not cruelty. This is protection." Every species in the galaxy agreed to these rules. Humans did not agree, Una said quietly. Something changed in the room. The guards became very still. Commander Seal's scales seemed to tighten against his body. "Excuse me?" he said. "When humans joined the Galactic Union, we were given the same classification. Class 9, apex predators from a death world. Dangerous beyond measure." Una's voice was steady now. She did not know where the words were coming from, but they felt right. "The Union wanted to restrict us, limit our movement, keep us contained. Do you remember what happened?" No one answered. But everyone knew. Humans had refused. Not with violence, not immediately, but with the promise of it. They had made it clear that any attempt to treat them as Class 9 predators would be met with resistance. The Union, looking at humanity's history of warfare, at their weapons, at their terrifying persistence, had quietly agreed to make an exception. "We convinced you to change the law," Una said. Because we proved that classification does not determine destiny. That nature can be overcome. That predators can live peacefully among prey. She gestured to the 3 cubs, still pressed against her legs. Dury was shaking. Taiho's ears were flat against his head. But Boris stood tall, watching, waiting. "Give them the same chance," Yuna said. "That is all I ask." Commander Seal stared at her for a long moment. Then he gestured to 2 of his guards. "Remove the creatures." The guards stepped forward. They carried catch poles, long metal rods with loops on the end designed to restrain animals without killing them. One of them reached toward Bora. Yuna raised her hand. It was not a weapon. It was not a signal for attack. It was simply a hand, palm facing outward, held steady in the air between the guard and the cub. The guard stopped. He did not take another step. His partner stopped beside him. Behind them, the other 10 guards seemed to hold their breath. Commander Seal watched with his yellow eyes, unblinking. "Move aside, human," he said. Yuna did not lower her hand. No, the silence stretched. Outside the facility, the station hummed with the sounds of thousands of lives continuing without interruption. But inside this small room, time itself seemed to pause. Every being in the galaxy knew about humans. They told stories in the dark spaces between stars. Stories about the death world called Earth, where everything wanted to kill everything else. Stories about the creatures who had crawled up from the mud and conquered their planet through pure stubborn refusal to die. Stories about the wars they had fought against each other. Wars that made alien conflicts look like children's games. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the smartest. But they were the most relentless. They could chase prey for days without stopping. They could survive wounds that would kill most other beings. They could hate with a passion that lasted generations, and they could love just as fiercely. The guards knew these stories. They had been trained to deal with human criminals, and the first lesson was always the same. Do not underestimate them. A human with nothing to lose was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. And right now, a human woman was standing between them and 3 predator cubs, with nothing in her hand but air, and absolutely no intention of moving. "You can take them," Yuna said softly, "but you will have to go through me. Every one of you. And I want you to understand something, Commander." She lowered her hand slowly to her side. "Humans are classified as predators too. We simply convinced the Union to make an exception." She smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "How many of your guards are you willing to lose to find out if that was the right decision?" The question dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was Bora's quiet breathing and the distant hum of the station's engines. Commander Seal stood perfectly still. His yellow eyes studied Yuna's face, searching for weakness, for bluff, for any sign that she would back down. He found nothing. "This is not over," he said finally. His voice was still cold, but there was something else in it now. Something that might have been respect, or might have been calculation. "Stand down." The guards lowered their weapons. One by one, they filed out of the facility, their footsteps echoing in the corridor outside. Commander Seal was the last to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at Yuna. "You have made powerful enemies today," he said. "I know," Yuna replied, "but I have also made a choice, and I will live with the consequences." Seal nodded once slowly. Then he turned and walked away, the door sliding closed behind him. Yuna's legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. The cubs rushed to her immediately. Bora pressed against her side. Taiho licked her face. Dury climbed into her lap and refused to move. She had won. For now. But she knew this was only the beginning. Word spread through the station like fire through dry wood. By midday, Everyone on Velis 7 knew what had happened. A human woman had faced down 12 armed guards. She had refused to surrender 3 illegal predators, and Commander Seal had retreated. The story grew with each telling. Some said Yuna had threatened to kill the guards with her bare hands. Some said she had pulled a hidden weapon. Some said she had simply stared at Commander Seal until he could not meet her eyes. The truth was simpler and more powerful than any of these versions, but the truth rarely mattered when a good story was being told. John-Ho found out while he was repairing a water pipe on the middle deck. A crothy worker, all 4 arms covered in grease, tapped him on the shoulder and told him that his human friend was in serious trouble. John-Ho dropped his tools and ran. He did not stop running until he reached Yuna's facility. The corridor outside was crowded. Beings of a dozen different species had gathered, some curious, some angry, some simply wanting to see the woman who had defied the law. Guards were trying to push them back, but more kept arriving. The crowd was growing by the minute. Junho pushed through. He was taller than most species, and humans had a reputation that made others move out of their way. He reached the door and found it sealed. He pounded on it with his fist. "Yuna!" "It is." "Junho, let me in." The door opened just enough for him to slip through, then closed immediately behind him. Yuna was sitting on the floor with the cubs. Her face was pale, and her hands were still shaking. Bora was standing between her and the door, teeth slightly bared, ready to fight anyone who tried to enter. Taiho and Dory were pressed close to Yuna's sides, their golden eyes wide with fear. "I heard what happened," Junho said. He knelt beside her and put his hand on her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" "No." Yuna's voice was hoarse. "They did not touch me. I think I surprised them." "You surprised everyone." Junho looked at Bora, still standing guard. The cub's eyes met his, and for a moment, Junho saw something he had never seen before. Gratitude, understanding, the knowledge that this human had risked everything to protect their family. "What happens now?" Yuna asked. "I do not know." Junho sat beside her, his back against the wall. "Commander Seal is not the type to give up. He will take this to the council. They will decide what to do." "And what will they decide?" Junho did not answer. They both knew what the council would decide. The law was clear. Class 9 predators could not exist in civilian space. Yuna had broken that law openly, in front of witnesses. There was only one possible outcome. Outside, the crowd was getting louder. Junho could hear voices raised in argument. Some were demanding that Yuna be arrested. Others were defending her. The station was dividing itself along lines that had not existed an hour ago. The door chime rang. Yuna and Junho looked at each other. Bora growled low in her throat, her body tensing for a fight. "Who is it?" Yuna called out. "It is Tova." The voice was familiar. Quiet and frightened, but also determined. "Please let me in." Yuna opened the door. Tova slipped through quickly, her forearms wrapped around herself as if she was cold. Her large mirror-like eyes were wet with tears. "I heard what happened," Tova said. "I came as fast as I could." She looked at the cubs, now much larger than when she had brought them to Yuna 6 months ago. "They are beautiful. I did not think they would survive." "Why are you here?" Junho asked. His voice was harder than usual. He had not forgotten that Tova was the one who had started all of this. "Do you want to help, or are you just here to watch?" Tova flinched at his tone, but she did not back down. "I want to help. I have been telling everyone what really happened. How I found the cubs, how their mother was dead, how Yuna saved them when no one else would." She turned to Yuna. "People are listening. Some of them think you are a hero. And the others?" Yuna asked. "The others think you should be executed." Tova's voice cracked, but the first group is larger, much larger. Over the next hour, more visitors arrived. A Velen merchant named Korgo, whose cargo animals Yuna had healed twice, brought food and water. 2 crothy mechanics came with tools to reinforce the door. A Talaxian trader delivered a small energy shield, not powerful enough to stop weapons fire, but strong enough to buy time. They came because they knew Yuna. They came because she had helped them, asked for nothing in return, and treated every creature with kindness, regardless of what species it was. They came because, on a station full of strangers and secrets, she had been a small light of genuine goodness. By evening, a wall of supporters had formed outside Yuna's facility. They did not fight the guards, but they did not move either. They simply stood there, a living barrier between the woman inside and the forces that wanted to take her away. Commander Seal watched from his security center. His yellow eyes moved across the monitors, counting faces, assessing threats. This had become much more complicated than he had expected. He opened a communication channel to the council chamber. "The situation has escalated," he reported. "The human woman has gathered significant support among the civilian population. Direct action will likely cause a riot." The council was made up of representatives from 7 major species on Vela 7. They argued among themselves for nearly an hour. Some wanted Seal to storm the facility and arrest Yuna immediately. Others wanted to negotiate. A few suggested simply waiting until the crowd dispersed. In the end, they reached a compromise. Commander Seal would speak to Yuna directly, without guards, without weapons. He would offer her a deal: surrender the cubs peacefully, and her sentence would be reduced to imprisonment instead of execution. Seal did not like this plan, but he followed orders. He walked through the crowd alone. Beings of all species stepped aside to let him pass, their eyes following him with hostility and fear. When he reached the door, he pressed the chime and waited. Yuna opened the door herself. Behind her, Junho stood with a metal pipe in his hands, ready to fight. The 3 cubs were nowhere in sight, hidden in their compartment. "Commander," Yuna said. Her voice was calm, much calmer than she felt. "I come alone," Seal said. "I want to talk." Yuna studied him for a moment. Then she stepped aside and let him enter. The facility was cramped with all 4 of them inside. Junho kept his grip on the pipe, watching Seal's every move. Tova had retreated to a corner, her mirror eyes wide with terror. "The council has made an offer," Seal said. He stood in the center of the room, his copper scales catching the dim light. "Surrender the predators, accept imprisonment, live. And if I refuse, then the council will authorize force. The crowd outside will be dispersed. You will be arrested. The creatures will be killed." Seal's voice was flat, stating facts without emotion. "Many beings may be hurt in the process. Is that what you want?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. She looked at Junho, who shook his head slightly. She looked at Tova, who was crying again. She looked at the wall panel behind which 3 cubs were hiding, trusting her to keep them safe. "No," she said finally. "That is not what I want." Seal nodded. "Then you will accept the deal?" "No." Yuna stepped forward until she was standing directly in front of the Torvian commander. He was taller than her, stronger than her, and backed by the full authority of galactic law. But she did not look away. "I want something else." "You are not in a position to negotiate. I am in the only position that matters." Yuna gestured at the door, at the crowd beyond it. "Those people are not here for me. They are here for what I represent. The belief that kindness matters. That law should serve life, not end it. That sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing." She took a breath. Her next words would change everything. "I want a trial. A real trial in front of the entire station. Let me make my case. Let the people decide if these cubs deserve to die. If you win, I will surrender peacefully. No riots. No resistance. But if I win, if I convince them that the law is wrong, then you must let the cubs live. Commander Seal stared at her. His yellow eyes were unreadable. The council will never agree to this, he said. They will if you recommend it. Yuna held his gaze. You are not just a soldier, Commander. You are the security chief of this station. The council respects you. If you tell them that a trial is the safest way to resolve this, they will listen. Why would I do that? Yuna smiled sadly. Because you are not evil. You are simply following orders. And somewhere inside you, there is a part that knows those orders might be wrong. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Finally, Seal spoke. I will present your request to the council, he said. I make no promises. He turned and walked to the door. Before he left, he paused and looked back at Yuna one last time. You are either the bravest being I have ever met, he said, or the most foolish. Yuna's smile did not waver. I have been told it is both. The door closed behind him. Junho let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like hours. Tova collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief. And somewhere behind a hidden panel, 3 predator cubs waited in the darkness, their lives hanging on the outcome of a trial that had not yet begun. 3 years had passed since the trial. Yuna still remembered every moment of it. The council chamber, packed with beings from every corner of the station. The faces staring at her, some with hatred, some with hope, most with simple curiosity. Commander Seal standing at the side, his yellow eyes watching everything, giving nothing away. She had spoken for 2 hours. She had told them about Earth, about the animals humans had saved from extinction, about the creatures they had learned to live with instead of destroy. She had shown them recordings of Bora, Taiho, and Dory playing together, eating from her hands, sleeping in peaceful piles. She had brought the cubs into the chamber itself, letting the council see for themselves that these were not monsters, but children. The vote had been close. 4 in favor of execution, 3 against. A tiebreaker was needed. Commander Seal had cast the deciding vote. He never explained why he voted to spare the cubs. When reporters asked, he simply said that the evidence supported the decision. When Yuna tried to thank him, he walked away without a word. But sometimes, late at night when the corridors were empty, she would see him standing outside her facility, watching through the window as the cubs played. He never came inside. He never spoke to her, but he always came back. The Galactic Council had been furious at first. They had threatened to remove Vela 7's trading license, to cut off supply routes, to make an example of the station that had defied their laws. But the story had spread too far, too fast. News channels across the galaxy had picked up the tale of the human woman and her predator cubs. Millions of beings had watched the recordings. Billions had followed the trial. The public pressure was impossible to ignore. Within 6 months, the council had agreed to create a new classification, protected predators under human guardianship. It was limited, carefully controlled, and covered only species that had never attacked sentient beings. But it was a start. For the first time in galactic history, the law recognized that predators might deserve protection instead of execution. Bora, Taiho, and Duri were fully grown now. They stood as tall as Yuna's shoulders, their blue fur thick and glossy, their golden eyes bright with intelligence. They had learned more than 500 commands. They could open doors, carry objects, and follow complex instructions. They understood dozens of species' languages, though they could not speak them. They were, in many ways, more like partners than pets. They had never harmed anyone. Not once in 3 years. When children ran up to pet them in the corridors, they stood perfectly still and let tiny hands touch their fur. When merchants offered them treats, they took the food gently, careful not to scratch the givers. When drunk traders stumbled too close and shouted insults, they simply walked away, ignoring the provocation as if it did not matter. They were beloved now. The entire station had adopted them. People set aside scraps of meat for them. Artists painted their images on corridor walls. A popular song had been written about them, something catchy that children sang in the recreation areas. They were no longer the illegal creatures hidden in a small facility. They were the heart of VLIS-7.YUNA, and Junho had married in a small ceremony 1 year after the trial. They had held it in the station's garden section, a small area where plants from dozens of worlds grew under artificial sunlight. The cubs had sat in the front row, watching with their golden eyes as Yuna and Junho exchanged promises. Dory had made a soft chirping sound at the end, and everyone had laughed. They still lived in the same facility where everything had started. But it was larger now, expanded into the neighboring sections with the council's reluctant permission. The sign above the door read Velis 7 Predator Sanctuary, and it was the first of its kind in the galaxy. Other Keth had been found over the years. Cubs rescued from smugglers. Orphans discovered on abandoned ships. Young ones confiscated from illegal breeding operations. Word had spread that there was a place where these creatures could be safe, where they would be cared for instead of killed. They were brought to Yuna, and she welcomed them all. The sanctuary now housed 15 Keth of various ages. Bora, Taiho, and Dory helped raise the younger ones, teaching them the same lessons Yuna had taught them. How to be gentle, how to wait, how to trust. The older cubs learned fast, following the example of the original 3. On a quiet evening 3 years and 4 months after the trial, a young Torvian diplomat arrived at the sanctuary. She was small for her species, with scales of pale silver instead of the usual copper. Her name was Rena, and she was writing a report on the sanctuary for the Galactic Council. Yuna led her through the facility, explaining the daily routines, the feeding schedules, the training methods. Rena listened carefully, asking questions, taking notes on a small device. She was polite and professional, but there was something else in her eyes, something that looked like wonder. They ended the tour in the main play area, a large room with soft floors and climbing structures. Several young Keth were chasing each other around the space, their movements fast and graceful. Bora lay in the corner, watching over them like a guardian. Dory was sprawled at Yuna's feet, his head resting on her boot. "May I ask you something?" Rena said. "Of course. How did you know?" The young diplomat looked at Bora, at Dory, at the plane cubs. "How did you know they would not hurt you?" "Everyone said they were monsters. Everyone said they would kill you the moment they were strong enough." "How did you know it would be different?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. She reached down and scratched behind Dory's ears, feeling his warm body press against her leg. He made a contented sound, deep in his chest. "I did not know," she said finally. "When I first held them, when I decided to keep them, I had no idea what would happen. I was terrified. Every day for the first year, I woke up wondering if this would be the day they turned on me. If everything the galaxy believed about them was true. Then, why did you do it?" "Because someone had to." Yuna looked up at Rena, her eyes steady. Someone had to take the chance. Someone had to believe that these creatures deserved better than execution. If I was wrong, if they had hurt me, then at least I would have died trying to do something good. But if I was right, she gestured at the room around them, at the cubs playing, at Boris standing watch, at the sanctuary that had grown from nothing. If I was right, then maybe the whole galaxy could learn something. Rena was quiet for a long moment. Then she closed her notebook and put it away. "You know," she said softly, "I grew up hearing stories about humans. Frightening stories. About your wars, your weapons, your capacity for violence. I was taught to fear your species. And now?" Rena smiled. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less official. "Now, I think maybe we were taught the wrong stories. Maybe the most dangerous thing about humans is not your violence. She looked at Dory, still sleeping peacefully at Yuna's feet. Maybe it is your hope. That night, after Rena had left and the cubs had been fed and the sanctuary had fallen quiet, Yuna sat in her favorite spot by the window. She could see the stars from here, millions of points of light scattered across the endless dark. Junho found her there an hour later. He sat beside her without speaking and took her hand in his. They had been married for 2 years now, and they still held hands like teenagers. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The future," Yuna said. "What we have built. What it might become. And what do you think it will become?" Yuna squeezed his hand. Outside, the stars continued their slow dance through eternity. Somewhere in the galaxy, other beings were looking up at those same stars, making their own choices, finding their own courage. "I think it will become whatever we make it," she said. "One choice at a time. One life at a time. One small act of hope after another until the whole universe changes." Junho smiled. "That sounds like a lot of work." "It is." Yuna leaned her head against his shoulder. "But we have time. We have each other. And we have them." As if on cue, Dory appeared in the doorway. He walked over to them and lay down at their feet, his golden eyes reflecting the starlight. A moment later, Bora and Taiho followed, settling around the two humans like a warm, protective circle. Yuna closed her eyes and listened to them breathe. Her family. Her impossible, wonderful, terrifying family. She had raised her hand 3 years ago and stopped an army. Not with violence. Not with threats. But with something far more powerful. Hope. And across the stars, the story continued to spread. The story of the human woman who had loved monsters and taught the galaxy that monsters could love back. It was told in space stations and on colony worlds, in merchant ships and military vessels, in the quiet voices of parents putting their children to sleep. It was a simple story. A human story. A story about the most dangerous weapon in the universe. Kindness. And it was only the beginning.